Okay, so tell me your favorite story.
My favorite story, I think, is when I became a Christian. When I was just about 8 years old, my Aunt Julia, who was a missionary to China, came and visited with us. And she took us out to the park, and we were swinging, and she said, Bitsy, are you a Christian? And I thought, I go to church. I'm a good girl. I don't murder anybody. I don't steal any money. So I guess I'm a Christian. Well, I think she must have talked to my mother, because my mother had another missionary come to my house and talk to me. And she talked to me about how Jesus paid for the things that I did wrong. And I thought, I'm doing very, very bad things wrong. But she said, now, if you want to ask Christ to come into your life and forgive your sins, and sins are the things that you do wrong, and I didn't feel like I'd done anything wrong, she said, well, if I offered you this glove, what are you supposed to do to get it? Well, I knew if I took it, she had another glove, she'd be without one glove, and I thought, well, that's not going to work very well. But then it wasn't long after that my Sunday school teacher asked me to memorize 2 Bible verses. One of them was Romans 3:23. Well, it was Saturday night. I loved that Sunday school teacher, and I wanted to do what she wanted me to do. So on Saturday night, I started memorizing the verses. And the first one was, the wages for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And I thought, oh, if everybody's sinned, then, oh, but I haven't done anything. Then the Lord reminded me of the time I took a piece of candy, and my mother didn't know that I got it at the grocery store, and I thought I got by with it. I thought, oh, if that sends you to hell, I guess I'm going to go to hell. But then I turned to Romans 6:23 and said, the wages of sin is death, and I knew that was hell. But the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ. And I thought, oh, if it's a gift, I don't have to buy it. I don't have to work for it. I can just take it. And so I pull a sheet over my head. It's just you and me, God. I've done the things wrong, and I really want you to give me that gift. And, oh, I had such peace after that. And every time after that, you know, when I'd argue with my brother, or I'd get mad at my little sister, Ruth, she wouldn't do what I told her to do. I thought, uh-oh, that's sin. I guess I'm not Christian. But then I heard a pastor, and if you have asked Christ to come into your life, and you knew you sinned, and you knew that you wanted that gift, then we have an enemy who tries to make you feel guilty all the time. And I thought, yeah, I know that. But he said, in 1 John 1:9 it says, if you confess your sin, he's faithful and just to forgive your sin and cleanse you from all unrighteousness. Unrighteousness. Righteous means right. Unrighteousness must be wrong. So if I just tell him I've done wrong, then he'll forgive me. And I tell you, it was a change in my life. I realized that I didn't have to deal with the burden of guilt. And that was such a joy to have that peace. And that's what changed my life.
So Ruth said something about digging a big hole in the backyard.
You want to hear that story again?
I want to hear your version of the story.
Well, I was so surprised when my brother asked Mother if we could dig a hole in the backyard. Because I know she cared for the flowers and the trees and everything, but he said he wanted to dig to China. And I thought, China? Wow, wouldn't that be exciting? So she even showed him where the tools were, and he got out. He was the only one that was big enough to use a shovel very well, but we were pretty good at throwing it after he dug it, you know. And we about this deep. And I thought, I wonder where China is. Have we gone far enough yet? Well, we were about tired of that project, but we did make some steps going down in there. But when you got down in there, it was just a hole. And so we asked Mother if we could put a top on it. So she showed us where a canvas was. And so we put the canvas down and put some boards on the side to hold it there. But when you got down in there, it was dark. And then we said, well, Mother, we need a light. So Daddy rigged us up an extension cord from the garage to go down into the hole. Well, once we got down there, all four of us got down in that hole, and there wasn't even room to move around. We said, this isn't any good. Might as well fill it back in again. So we took it all apart and filled it all in again. Gave up on China. But we had a chinaberry tree in our backyard, and it had 4 limbs on it, and there were 4 of us. So each one of us had a limb that was our limb, and nobody better get on our limb. Now you were allowed to, if your limb was up there, you're allowed to step on my limb. Mine was the lowest limb, but that's all you could do. You had to go on up. But I guess she told you about jumping from one garage to the other garage, didn't she?
You can tell me.
Well, you know, when I think about it, I don't think Mother knew we did this, because there was a picket fence that was running between the garages. And if we had missed and jumped and fallen down, we had to hit that picket fence. But Ruth didn't want to do it. Lynn did it all the time, 4 garages. And so I thought, well, yeah, I can do anything he can do, so I did it too. And then I asked Marielle to do it. She was my older sister. No, sir, she wasn't going to do that at all. And so Ruth said, well, I'll try. She was littlest, and I was really surprised that she did, but she climbed up on the fence and climbed up on the garage, and she jumped from one to the other one, and I thought, oh, she's a brave girl.
How old were y'all?
We must not have been more than 8 or 9, something like that. I don't remember how old we were, but I know we were too little to be jumping on top of garages. But we would climb up in the chinaberry tree, and we would tell stories. And did you ever tell a part of a story and then you let the next person tell a part of the story? Oh, I tell you, we had some wild stories that we told, and thoroughly enjoyed them. Everyone tried to make the next part worse than the other ones had. I remember one time I got in trouble. I don't remember what I did, but oh no, I was mad at my brother. And I didn't get mad at my brother very often, because he was pretty easygoing and he was helpful and everything, but I was really, really mad at him. And I was telling my mother how bad he was, and she said, okay, you just go out there and you get a switch, and we got a peach tree in the backyard, and he can get a switch, and you can just take it out on each other. And I thought, good, I'd like to do that. Well, I went out there, and he was bigger than I was, and when I saw the size of his switch and the size of my switch, I said, I don't think I'm mad at him anymore. So we didn't use those switches. But we had, in our house, we had an ice box. And every couple of times a week, the iceman came. And Mother had a sign out that said 100, 50, 75, 25. And we always got 50 pounds of ice, and she turned it so that 50 was at the top, and the Iceman knew that's how much we wanted. But we always liked it when the Iceman came, because he would take his ice pick and chip up 100 pounds of ice until he got a 50 pound. Well, when he did that, ice chips went everywhere. Now, we didn't have refrigerators, and we didn't have ice all the time like we do now. But he would let us eat all the chips that fell. We had a great time. At the corner of our house, the corner of our block, there was telephone pole, and about once a year they came and put tar on it to waterproof it. But that tar would get hard, but not too hard, and we could tear off a piece of it and we could chew it like chewing gum. It was good. It tasted good, and it lasted a long time. We had a great time. But my mother was fantastic in that she taught us how to save, and she taught us how to work. And I remember when we were just maybe 10 years old, she would go to the grocery store and buy a case of Cokes. And I don't know how much they cost, but anyway, she would get a bucket, ice them down, and then we could go to the place where they were building. They were building houses all around us. And we would sell them for twice what we paid for it, and Mother let us have the money. And we saved half of it, tithed 10% of it, and then we could do whatever we wanted with the rest of it. And so we would save it until we had enough to buy bubble gum or a sucker or something like that at the store. And it seemed like to me the other kids had a lot of more money to spend than we did, but we had enough so we didn't feel poor. And I don't know if she told you about the school that we went to or not. It was River Oak School, and it was in the rich part of town. We lived on this side of the highway, and the rich part of the people lived on the other side of the highway, but that's where we went to school. And it was really an advanced school. We did things that other kids never had a chance to do. one of the things they did was teach us about different musical instruments. They would turn on, they had the musical instruments up there on the stage, and they would play the music, and if a violin played a solo, then they would play the violin. If it was a guitar, or if it was a drum, or whatever, then we learned the musical instruments by hearing the music. We also listened to opera. Can you imagine elementary school listening to opera? But Madame Schumann was a very famous singer, and we would listen to her singing. I would imitate her singing, you know. But I also found out later, have you ever heard the phrase, wait until the fat lady sings? Did you know that Madame Schumann had been struck? She was able to go all over the world during the war because she was such a good musician. But if she sang a certain song, it meant something to the soldiers, and they would know whether they should advance or not. And so that's why the phrase came, wait till the fat lady sings, so we'll know what we're supposed to do. But we also, they let us have gardens, and they dug it up for us, and then we planted whatever we wanted to plant, and then we took care of them, watered them, and took care of them the whole time. And it was a fun school to go to. I don't know if Ruth told you what a hard time she had, though, because Mother did not want her to go to school and not know how to read, because she saw that I had a terrible first grade teacher. Her name was Miss Teagarden, and she didn't like children, and she never should have been a teacher. And she was really difficult. If anybody messed up, they had to go stand in the hall, and I was scared to death of her. And there were a lot of things she asked us to do that she never should have asked us to do. Our muscles were not ready for it, but I didn't know that then. But anyway, I was afraid of it. Mother didn't want Ruth to have Miss Teagarden and not be able to be at the head of the class. So she taught her to read at home, which is fine, you know. But when she went to the River Oak School, they saw she could read, and she knew arithmetic, and she knew, you know, what the first graders had already learned. And so they put her in the second grade, which made it harder. She would have been at the top grade of the first grade, but at the bottom of the second grade. But Mother didn't realize that at the time, so she tutored it at home so she could catch up. But it gave her a terrible inferiority complex to start with. Did Ruth tell you about the times we had pull candy parties on Friday night?
She told me a little bit about it.
Well, Mother loved kids, and we always had kids at our house. Some people don't like kids. It's just like right now, the kids in the neighborhood all come over to my house because they know that they're comfortable here and they like being around us, and we play and we eat and we do all kinds of things. Well, every Friday night she would invite the neighborhood kids to come over, and she played games. Did she tell you some of the games we played?
She said the names, but she didn't say what they were.
Oh, well, we played a game that was called Round the Rules of Contrariness, and everybody held onto a towel, really what it was, a dish towel, and the leader said, around and around the rules of contrariness. When I say push, you pull. When I say pull, you push. Pull. Well, everybody's supposed to push. Well, if they pulled, and if they did what she said, pull, then they had to forfeit something, a shoe or a tie, you know, something. I played this with Isaac one time, and he got down to his underwear. I said, we're stopping here. He was ready to take that off too. But then they had to do something to earn it back. So the leader would have somebody sitting there that didn't really know who was what, and she'd hold it above whatever it was, a shoe or what, a sock or something. Heavy, heavy hangs over your head. And this one just sitting down says, fine or superfine, woman or man, boy or girl. So she said, superfine. What shall the owner do to redeem it? So this one that's holding the shoe over here told them they had to run around the house 15 times, or they had to go bow in front of the prettiest girl, or whatever they could think of to earn their thing back. And the kids loved to play that. And we played Prince of Wales Lost His Hat, and lined all the children up in a row, and then numbered them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or however many they were. And then the leader said, the Prince of Wales has lost his hat, and number 1 has found it. Well, number 1 is supposed to say, who, sir? I, sir? No, sir, not I, sir. And if he didn't say it quick enough, she said, number 1, go to the foot. Well, whoever was at the head, you always try to get them at the foot. So we found out if we looked at the foot of the foot and said number 1, then number 1 was looking at the foot, and they said number 1, go foot. But if they could say Hooser before she said go to foot. And so we all enjoyed that. When I had internationals, and when I taught internationals, they were college students, but I said, would you like to know some of the games that we played when we were growing up? And so I played some of these games that we played. And they didn't play games. I was really surprised. I asked them what books their mothers read to them and what parks they went to, what they did as children. They studied, and that was about it. I was so surprised. But we had a good time. We didn't have a lot of money, but Daddy got a second-hand bicycle, and all 4 of us rode it. It's supposed to be Leon's. It was a boy's bicycle, but that didn't make any difference to us. I think half of my childhood I had skinned knees, but I loved riding the bicycle. And we used to play outside all the time. Kids don't play outside much anymore because they're inside watching television. It's hot or it's cold, you know. But I don't remember it being hot, and I don't remember it being cold, except in the summertime we would take naps. Mother would read to us. We read all the classics while we were lying down. We'd lay down on blankets, and they had one fan going all the time. And then she'd read to us until we gone to sleep, or if it'd been long enough that we'd get up and play. I always hated it when I went to sleep, because if I slept very long, I was just dead tired when I woke up. So I like to take just a short nap. So I'd say, wake me up in 15 minutes, if I go to sleep. So she would go play the piano and to wake us up, which I loved. I loved to hear her play the piano. And then we played magic music. You played magic music, haven't you? Well, she'd play the piano, and we would choose an object, just like a fountain pen or a box or something, and somebody would go out of the room, and we'd hide it. Then we'd ask them to come on in, and the closer they got to where it was, the louder the music was, until they would know they were close to it. And if they got really close to it, it was just really banging on the piano until they found it. Well, I played that with Joe and Patty's kids, only I didn't have any music. So what I did was I clapped. I said, let's just clap real quietly when they're a long way away from it. But when they get close to it, keep it louder, louder, louder. Oh, they love to play with it. They love to play that game. And outside we'd play Annie Over. Have you ever played that? You didn't play much as a kid, did you? Well, we would have a ball, and we just had a one-story house, and when somebody get in the backyard and somebody get in the front yard, and we'd say Annie Over, and we'd throw the ball over the top of the house, and the ones at the back would get it, and then they would say Annie Over, and here the ball would come over the top of the house for us to catch on this side. And of course we played cowboy and Indians and had play guns. My daddy made us guns out of wood with have you ever seen a wooden gun with oh, you have seen it, with a clothespin on it, with rubber band. Okay. Doesn't hurt anybody, but it's fun to shoot them. Of course, we played hide and seek and all the things that kids ordinarily play. But we did have a lot of fun in our neighborhood, and we didn't have a lot of homework. When I taught school, I didn't ever get anybody homework. I figured if they'd been in school all day long, they needed to get outside and play. And I still believe that. I don't think anybody ought to have any homework after they've been at school. But when my kids were in junior high school, they did a great thing. They had a class for an hour, but for 45 minutes she would have the class, and the last 15 minutes they could do their homework. Which I thought was great, because if they had any questions, she knew the answers. When they went to new math, I had no idea anything about new math, so it was real hard to help my kids. I remember one time Bonnie asked me a question, and I said, well, let's go over the question again. So she did, and she said, oh, I see what. I said, good, I'm glad I could help you. That's all I could do.
Ruth said that your mom baked cookies.
What's that?
Ruth said that your mom baked cookies.
Yes, my mother always baked a lot, and we had dessert after the big meal, always. But this was during the Depression years, and I don't know if you know what people went through during the Depression years, but they didn't have much money. But I never did really know that we were poor, except I heard my mother say one time to my daddy, well, we can always stop the newspaper and the telephone. And we never did do that, so I knew we were okay. But she wanted my sister to have piano lessons. I don't know why she didn't teach her herself, because she was a wonderful pianist, but anyway, I guess she thought it'd be better for somebody else to teach her. And so Mother would bake a cake or make cookies to pay for her lessons. And we had elocution lessons. You know what that is? Oh, good, because a lot of people don't. But we would, on a Friday night or sometime when company came, we would put on plays, or we would say the speech that we had learned, and she would dress us up. And like one time we did a play about a missionary, and we were all dressed up like missionaries, you know, adult clothes and stuff like that. And it was fun for us, and we didn't have a movie camera, so we couldn't take pictures, but anyway, it was fun for all of us. But it gave us a reason to memorize the poems and things that we did. I found a book the other day that had some of those poems in it that we learned. Only problem is my eyes are not good enough for me to read that. Would you like to have that book and type it up for me?
Sure.
It's fun. It's fun to see them. Of course, I was familiar with all of them, but you wouldn't be familiar. But anyway, it was a friend's place. I remember when I was little and we went to the doctor's office. I don't know whether my mother bartered with the doctor or not, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if she didn't. But back in those days, the doctor would take care of the whole family, and you didn't have to have a lot of appointments. Well, you know how things go through a family. If one of them gets a sore throat, all of them get a sore throat. But Mother said she liked to go to this doctor because he would talk out loud. Well, her ears are okay, her throat seems to be okay, you know, her head stopped up a little bit or whatever. So she knew what he was thinking, and I thought, what a good thing for a doctor to do. They've got all this medical knowledge, and all they do is tell you the end result, you know, what you need to do, take antibiotics. But he didn't. He was real good with her. And I remember when I had my tonsils, I was going to have my tonsils out, and they used to do it a lot. They put earplugs in your ears now, but they used to take their tonsils out. And my mother said, when you have your tonsils out, you can have all the ice cream you want. I'd never had all the ice cream I wanted. I thought, what a wonderful, I'll do anything to get all the ice cream. Then, after you had your tonsils out, your throat was so sore you didn't want any ice cream. The only time in my life I didn't want any ice cream. But I remember one time I thought my daddy was dying. He had his teeth pulled, but he must have had aspirin in his system or something, because he just kept bleeding and kept bleeding and kept bleeding, and he was spitting into a bucket, and the bucket just turned bright red, and I thought, my daddy's dying, my daddy's dying. And when my mother realized how upset I was, then she took me in her arms and said, no, it's going to be all right. He's going to be all right in the morning. But I wrote a story not too long ago about our trips, because we would go down to see my grandmother in the valley. We lived in Houston. And the night before, my daddy would put bricks in the fireplace. That's how we heated our home, was with the fireplace. And then the next morning, my daddy would wrap the bricks in a blanket, and we put it on the floor of the car, and it would keep us warm, you know, almost the whole time there. And we liked to travel because Mother read to us the whole time. And she was a good reader. She, you know, put a lot of expression into it. I felt like I was really living, you know, where it was that we were doing. So we enjoyed that. Of course, we always fought over who got the window seat. You ever do that? But we took turns, and we learned to take turns. But if anybody got sleepy, like Ruth would be the baby or the little one, she had a blanket on the floor, so that one got to sleep on the floor. And I always thought, then they had something behind the back seat so you could sit up there, and I thought that was fun, because if you were driving at night, you could look up and see the stars. And I remember one time I asked Mother if I could just go to sleep in my clothes. Well, she said, yeah, you can do that. And what I wanted to do was just go from the car, where I was sleepy, to the bed. But she took me in the house, changed my clothes, and then let me sleep in my clothes. I said, yeah, it's not what I want. I remember one time Mother asked me what kind of cake I'd like to have for my birthday. And I said, I'd like to have a candy cake. I don't like cake much, but I liked candy. Well, she baked a cake, and then she put candy all over, which was a halfway, you know, what I wanted. But we didn't have a lot of toys when I was growing up. Did Ruth tell you about the toys? Well, we made a lot of our own toys. I don't know if you've ever made a tank out of a spool of thread and a match and a rubber band, have you? Have you ever seen that? Well, Mother sewed a lot, so she had a lot of spools, and we'd get the big spool, and you'd put a rubber band in the middle and put the match in, pull the rubber band out and put the match in there, and then wind it up like this and put it on the table, and it would take off. And it was fun. And we played jacks a lot. Kids don't play jacks much anymore, and we played hopscotch. And there are a lot of games that we played that we just made up, you know. And when we would have, sometimes we had as many as 2 sets of skates, and we all learned how to skate. But if you lost a skate, they didn't throw the other one away. They took it apart and nailed it to a 2x4, one end, and then an upright and a handle, and we had a skateboard. No, that's not what they call it. Scooter. We'd have a scooter. And besides the wooden guns that we made our own, and we were always glad when Daddy would blow a tire and we would have the rubber bands from they used to have rubber tires. Inner tube was, and we'd cut them off, and we could play all kinds of games with that. We just, take them and shoot them at people, but it was fun. We had a good time, and because there were 4 of us, there was always somebody to play with. And I don't remember us really getting really mad at each other, but except one time I remember really getting mad at Ruth. Behind our garage we had a chicken coop. And Mother put a glass egg in the nest. Supposedly it's supposed to make the chickens have more eggs. I don't know whether that's true or not. But anyway, Mother sent us out there to get the eggs. And we went out there, Ruth and I together, and she wanted to bring the glass egg in. I said, no, you got to leave it here. We can't eat it. It belongs in the nest. Well, she was bound and determined to bring it in. And I said, no, you can't do that. And I took one of the eggs that I had and flung it on her head. She put the egg back, but she came running into Mother and said, she brought one of the eggs on my head. But I remember one time she and I got in a fight, because I was the oldest daughter and she's supposed to do what I said, And we got in a tumble fight. And because I was a redhead, freckle-faced, my face got red. And then I heard Mother come in the front door, and I knew she wouldn't want us to be fighting. And I tried my best. Oh, how do you get your face not white? And I remember Mother put powder on her face when she went to Sunday school. So I went in there to her room. I put powder all over my face. So she said, what did you do? Oh, she seemed like to me she had, they say eyes. Mothers have eyes in the back of their head. They also have ears. They also are very observant. But we really did have a wonderful childhood. We had a good time. And we took a lot of trips. Daddy, I remember one time we went to a park. We went swimming a lot. And we went to a park one time and somebody had left a football there. And it didn't have a name on it, didn't have anything on it. And all day we waited for somebody to come and pick that football up. And nobody ever came. And I thought, I wonder what we're going to do with this. Are we going to leave it here, or are we going to take it? And so I asked Daddy, and he said, well, nobody's come to get it. I guess we might as well take it. And I thought, I didn't think my daddy would say that. I didn't think he'd ever take anything. My daddy would never buy anything on Sunday, because he said if you buy it on Sunday, that encourages people to buy on Sunday and the stores to stay open. So we never bought anything on Sunday. I guess did a good job on Saturday. But one time we rented a cabin in Galveston, and for a week or 2 weeks, I don't know what it was, but all of us were such fair skin that we couldn't go swimming until after 5. But she would let us, but they didn't have any skin cream then, sunscreen that you could put on. But we played games at the house all day, but we could hardly wait. I mean, that's when I learned to tell time, when it was 5 o'clock, because then we could go down, and there was a pier down there, and she would let us go crabbing, and she would let us go watch the fish, and we had a net that we could catch the fish with. I don't know what they did with the fish, But we could go crawdad hunting too. But most of the time we just would swim until it was dark 30. But she didn't swim. And she always was there on the pier watching us. And we didn't ever go into the deep part because she was afraid for us to go too far and then she couldn't get us back. But we had more fun there because there was also, let's see, I don't know what you call it, but there was a dance hall, and they also had a lot of things like you have at a circus where you throw the balls and catch the fish, and they had thing this was before movies, but they had pictures that you could go like this and you'd see the movements of the figures as you turned around. And we would, in the morning we'd say, Mom, what can we do to earn a nickel? You know, 'cause those things didn't cost much, but not but a nickel. So, but we really had a good time doing some of those things when we had money. When we didn't, we watched other people do it. But we had a good time sitting around and watch the people dance. And we liked the music. And we would, you know, little kids, they'd dance to the music. But I remember the time that Aunt Julia came to see us. In Houston, they used to have concerts on Saturday night or Friday night. I don't know which night it was, but anyway, it was an evening concert. And we just loved it. I just love the music. And Mother told me one time when I was about 3 or 4 or something like that, I went up on the stage and I danced to the music. Of course, everybody tapped their heads, and I didn't know what they were clapping for. But I remember Aunt Julia said, do you go to church on Sunday night? And I said, no, we go to the park and listen to the music. Mother said, I think that's Saturday night we go. But I enjoyed school too. I took violin when I was in junior high school and then played in the high school orchestra. And I wanted to play an instrument that I could play in the band because I wanted to be in the marching band. My brother played the horn and he was in the marching band. But Ruth played the cello and Mariel played the piano and I played the violin. And I played in a quartet that the school had. And the only time I won first place in the music contest, that was a state music contest, was when I played the viola. And the reason I got first place because I was the only violist. Actually, there was another kid, but he played the violin and they just handed him the viola and he played something, and so I got first place. I was proud of it.
How old were you?
Junior high school. Yeah, I played the orchestra in high school, but I learned in junior high to play the violin, and I really loved it. I played it until my eyes got to the place where I couldn't read the notes very well, but I enjoyed it. And I've still got 2 violins, so if your children want to take violin when they get a little older, I've got Uncle Dee's violin. It's a real nice one. But Mother saw to it that we were involved in a lot of the activities to keep us out of trouble. You know, so many of the kids would go in the wrong direction, but we never did. We were involved in our church activities, and they were our friends, and we did things with them. And there was always something going on, so we had a good time. And she let us have pets. We had dogs. I like cats better than dogs. I've got a dog now. The only reason I've got a dog now is because my granddaughter said, would you please take care of him for a little while? She couldn't take care of him in the apartment what she had. And that was 3 years ago. But she'd take him back if I got tired of him. But Athena does all the tricks for the kids in the neighborhood, so everybody has a good time with her. So, what other questions you have?
Well, how did you meet your husband?
How did I meet my husband? Mary Earl, my sister, was dating a boy at our church in Oklahoma City. And he said he had a friend who was in the Army. And my mother said, you don't have anything to do with anybody in the Army. But Charles assured her that he was a nice guy. And he had 3 months leave. And instead of just going places and playing around, he was always a businessman. And he took a job in Ringgold, Texas, as a pharmacist. He had gotten his degree, a pharmaceutical degree. And so he was working as a pharmacist there. And Charles, the one that Mary was dating, had his car because he was in such a small town he didn't have any use for it. So he said when the 3 months were up, then we drove to Ringgold, Mary Earl and Charles and I to give him his car back, and then he came back to Oklahoma City, and we went out to dinner, and we had him in our house, and we went out to a show together. And I think that he didn't have but a couple of days, so we didn't see each other very much, but then we wrote each other for 2 years. And I really didn't see him but one other time. He came to see me in Borger, and then I flew out to see him at Fort Benning, Georgia. And then when he had a little time off, then we planned to get married. And when everybody was in the service, so he didn't even have anybody to be the best man. So you know what we did? We went out to the Navy base, and he went to the officers club and said, is there anybody here that will serve as my best man for my wedding? And one guy held up his hand, so he got him ready and took him out there. But he was supposed to have 3 days off, but right after the marriage, he got his orders that he had to be there back in Fort Benning, Georgia in 24 hours or 34 hours, something like that. Just barely enough time for us to get there. And both of us were just worn out. I drove part of the time and he drove part of the time. And when we got there, he had already made reservations in a hotel for us to stay. And but he had to go back to camp. So he left me and went with one of the other fellas to go to camp, and he had to have a 5-mile run that morning after taking that long drive. But then I was so tired when he said come and get him the next day, or I guess it was that evening, I backed the car right into a tree. I didn't hurt the car, but it just, I knew how tired I was when I couldn't even see a tree behind me. But we had a good time. I went out there to the base because he couldn't get off back then. That was during the war. But he would get off maybe a day or a half day during the weekend. And we did go to church together. And he had been to Baptist churches before. He came from a Methodist background, but he was glad to go to the Baptist church with me, which I was glad because I was born and bred Baptist. But you know, the denomination doesn't make as much difference as if they're teaching the Bible. And that's where your security is. If you know what the Word of God says, then you can judge whatever's in the newspaper and know whether it's the truth or not. But he went overseas, and he really wanted to have a baby. And I think he wanted to have a baby because he didn't know whether he was going to live or die. And he just well, after he went overseas, then I found out I was pregnant. And I wrote him letters and telling him about being pregnant. But the baby was 3 months old before he heard about it because the communication was so bad. But I lived with Mary Earl and one of the other wives of one of the officers in Oklahoma City while he was overseas. And it didn't cost very much to live with all three of us there, and so I saved every one of the paychecks that he sent to us. And when he got back, Bonnie she was born in February, and he came back in December. So she was almost a year old before he saw her. But a friend of ours had gone on vacation, and he let us use their house until we decided what we were going to do. And he had gotten a job lined up in Corpus Christi. And then I said, well, if you're going to finish your education, now's the time to do it. Because they had the GI Bill, and he could do it. And so he went back to school, and he sold full of brushes while he was in college so that he could pay for the food. But with the GI Bill, it was great. And we had enough money to pay cash for the house because of what I'd saved while he was overseas. Which is pretty good, because the next house you had enough money for down payment and almost pay off your house. So we were always so glad when the house payments were over and we owned it ourselves. But we had all 4 kids in college almost at the same time. All 4 of us were in college at the same time. We had a freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior in college at the same time. I don't think my mother ever had a new dress or a new coat or anything the whole time we were in college, but all of us worked. I got 10 cents an hour for typing, 25 cents an hour for working for a professor. I got 10 cents a page when I typed thesis for college students. Since I was a commercial major, I that's the way I earned my money. But when I graduated and went to teaching school in Borger, Texas, I wanted to send money back to help Ruth through school. And when I sent the money, Mother sent it back. She said, "No, I just have one in school now. We're okay." So I taught school for a year, and then I got married. And then we had the 4 children. All of us wanted 4 children. And Muriel would have had 4 children, except one of hers died. But because we enjoyed each other so much, I knew that my kids would enjoy each other. And they did. They did. I had a good time.
Tell me about your pets that you had when you were a kid.
Well, we had a dog and we had cats, and they were all outside animals, though. We didn't have any inside like this one. I remember one time, I don't know whether Ruth told you this or not, but I was thinking about one time at Thanksgiving, my father wanted to give each of the salesmen that were under him a turkey. So he bought live turkeys. You couldn't buy them in the store like you can now, already dressed and ready to go. So he bought enough live turkeys for all of his men and put them in the backyard and fed them for a day or two before it was time to give them to the men. And somebody left the gate open and the turkeys went out. We chased those turkeys all over that neighborhood trying to catch them. But back in those days, you still couldn't buy a chicken already ready to go. So we had chickens in our backyard. And did you ever see anybody wring a chicken's neck? Well, you take the chicken by the neck and you go like that. And then the neck comes off, and then the body jumps around for the longest long time. You ought to see it. I just thought, how can that chicken keep moving when his head's gone? But then she would have to get boiling water and pour it over the chicken to pull the feathers off. And then she would put it in boiling water to get anything cleaned out, and then cut it open and dig out the guts. And then she could cut the chicken up. And my mother always said she liked the back. And I never knew till I was grown that it was because there were so many of us. And the back has practically no meat on it, but she always said that was her favorite. So, you know, she could stretch. She could stretch money and she could stretch food more than anybody I ever wrote about. We had a lot of beans and cornbread and rice, but it was always good food. And she always had a garden, and so we had fresh things too. And she would can food, so we didn't have any problem with. We never would without food. We never did have a hard time, but a lot of people did. But I remember one. Didn't Ruth tell you about the time when she got hit by a car? She was about 2 years old, I think, and I think she'd just been playing in the neighbor's yard. And she needs to tell this story, but she watched a car go by and she thought it was okay to cross the street, but another car came and hit her, and they took her to the hospital. I didn't think she was going to live, but she did. But I tell you, I was so grateful that God saved her life. But we did a lot of praying because she just was limp. She just didn't have any life in her.
How old is she?
I think she was about 2, so I would be 4. But I remember it as if it were yesterday because it was so traumatic for me.
Do you know any stories about things that happened with your parents or with your grandparents?
Yes, I remember. We didn't go to our grandparents but 1 or 2 times when we were little. But I remember sitting in my grandmother's lap and I said, "Grandmother, your skin is bigger than you are, isn't it?" She said, "Yes, when you get older, that's what happens." But when we were older, we spent the summer there. At least seemed like a summer. Anyways, a long time. And she rented a horse for us. We were about 12, 13, something like that. And we just thoroughly enjoyed that horse. We'd taken turns, or 2 of us riding it at once, and just all over the yard. And they had a big area where we could ride. They lived in San Benito. But I remember at the very last, the horse would come shy up against a tree and scratch our legs. And we didn't know why, but after we left, then later, grandmother wrote and said that horse had a coat, and she didn't want us on her back. But my grandfather moved to the valley from Louisiana because they told us that that's where things would grow year-round. The weather was so beautiful. And he went down there and had an orchard, and we got to see the grapefruit and the oranges and everything that was there. My Aunt Nana and Uncle Mitchell lived down in the valley, and when we moved from Houston, we lived in San Antonio first, and we moved to Arkansas, and then we moved to Houston, and then we went to the valley. And then we all graduated from Corpus Christi High School, and then Oklahoma University, so that's where we went. But when we lived in the valley, Aunt Nana and Mitchell lived on the Resaca, which was almost the end of a river. And there was a dam down below, but the water was pretty still. And he built a little island out in the middle of it, with a bridge across it, and we would go out there and go swimming, and had the best time swimming. He had a big hay barn where he kept the hay for his cows, and we could play house up there and have more fun up there in that attic and that barn with the hay. We probably messed up his hay, but anyway, we had a good time doing it. We would dig a hole in there, and this is my house, and don't you get in my house. This is mine. You can have one over here. But it was fun just to play up there. And my Aunt Nana, it was fun to be at her house because she was always making something that we weren't used to. They had a smokehouse, and Mitchell would take a pig and cook it like the Hawaiians do, the whole pig, head and face and eyes and all, But she would also grind up the meat and stuff sausages. And I'd never seen a sausage stuffed. And I'd never seen anybody barbecue a pig like that. And I'd never seen anybody feed the hogs and feed the horses and feed the cows like they did. And so I really saw a good picture of a rural living when we went there. And Nana was always so good to us. She also would tell us stories, and they had 4 children and we had 4 children, and her 4 children were just younger than all of us. So each of us had one of their children was ours. And her youngest was mine. His name was Bill. And I really loved Aunt Nana because I love babies. And the baby was asleep. Bill was asleep. And I said to Nana, when's he going to wake up? Well, I don't know. He hadn't been asleep very long. And I'd come back in about 5 minutes. Is he awake yet? No. She said, let's go wake him. I thought, she's going to wake that baby just so I can play with him. And I did just thoroughly enjoy playing with little Bill. He was mine. And each of us had one of us that we palled with. But it was nice because we were the oldest, so we could tell him what to do, and we could do, that worked out beautifully. We had a good time together. They went to the Presbyterian church and we went to the Baptist church, so we didn't get to be with them on Sunday, but we would be with them during the week, and Nana and Mother just thoroughly enjoyed each other. So they came in or we came to be with them a lot of the time. It was fun. Something that I think was very wrong, when we were in the valley, there were a lot of Mexican children that went to school, and I could see why they did what they did, but they told them not to speak Spanish on the school grounds because they wanted to learn English. But I thought later, wouldn't it be great if they'd encouraged the Mexicans to teach us Spanish and us teach them English? But because of what they had said, we almost looked down on the Mexican kids instead of saying, we could learn from you. We could have learned from each other and it would have been great. But we weren't that advanced. It's too bad. Too bad. But we walked to school. We walked to school in San Benito, we walked to school in Houston, and we walked to school in Corpus Christi. Now, in bad weather, Daddy would always take us, but it was 2 miles from high school in Corpus Christi home. We lived on Carancoa, which was just, I don't know if you know Corpus, but there's a bluff there, and we lived right up above the bluff. And I love to read, but I always felt bad about going to the library and getting a book because I couldn't finish it in the 2 weeks, and nobody ever told me you could renew a book. And I'd read half a book, and I'd be so I wanted to see what happened to that book, and I'd take the book back and turn it back in. And it's too bad somebody didn't tell me you can renew books. I never get through reading. I've always got at least 2 books that I'm reading at one time.
Is there anything that you wanted to say that we didn't get to?
Well, yeah, I'd like to tell you about our heritage. We have a wonderful heritage. Our great-grandfather always closed his prayers at the table, and Lord, we claim the promise that you will bless the children of the godly for as long as life shall last, is what he said. Actually, the Bible says for 1,000 generations. And he didn't figure we were going to have another 1,000 generations before the Lord came. So, you know, somebody asked Aunt Earl one time why she thought we had such a godly family. And she said, I think it's because of my grandfather's prayers. And we've had more missionaries in our family than any other family I know about. We've had more presidents of universities and doctors and professional people than almost any family I know about. And I know when my 98-year-old aunt died, well, before she died, her 88th birthday, they had a party for her, and the man had looked up our history of the Meadows, and he said there's 3 outstanding things about this family: education and religion and oil. Oil because they discovered oil on my grandfather's property. And he said, no, I've got that in the wrong order. It's Christianity first, and not religion, and education, and oil. Oil changed the way we had, the family had a little more money. But my mother said one time when her mother and father were praying, and when the oil came in, and her father would say, now Lord, you give us what we deserve. And grandmother said, Lord, you give us what you want us to have. And my mother wondered which one God was going to answer. Well, actually, another part of the family got most of the money, but it was because it was a crooked deal, really, is what it was. They didn't divide it evenly. But God blessed our part of the family more than He did the part that got the money. So money's not the answer. But when I think about, I grew up knowing that missions was what our family was about. We've either sent them or prayed for them or paid money for them or helped them go. And I've been on 8 mission trips myself to 8 different countries. And it makes me know that we don't have much longer. I really think the Lord's coming soon. And I want to go up in the rapture. I don't want to miss out on anything but I think it'd be great. And I think everybody needs to be prepared to die or to go up in the rapture, one or the other, because it's the only thing we know for sure is that everybody's going to die. And I want to go to be with the Lord. But it's great to have had the missionaries in our home. I got to know so many of them personally because they were family, and also because Mother was so mission-minded that anytime anybody came to the church, she had them over to our house either to stay, spend the night, or to come for a meal, or just to come for a visit. And so I grew up with the mission program. And I'm still teaching a Sunday school class at 85, and I guess unless the Lord comes or unless I lose my eyesight or something, I'll keep on teaching. But I feel like the Word of God is so important that we really need to know it from beginning to end. And I don't know if Ruth told you or not, but we read the Bible every night. She reads the Bible through the Bible in a year, and she keeps reading that year after year. And then she reads 2 devotional books, and then the prayer list for her church, and then we pray together. So we feel like that it draws us together. There's just nothing like it. And I'm anxious for my children to have the same thing, and I pray they will. So come with me.